So today I'm here to talk to you about a transformation programme we've done in Orbit, a successful one, hopefully, eventually. But I do want to put it into the context of the wider approach that we've taken to transformation in Orbit, dating back to sort of 2011. So that sounds really boring and arduous, but I'll skim over that because it does help in terms of why and how we've managed this programme. So in terms of sort of programmes and transformation for Orbit, this was quite new. It was something that was discussed and ummed about whether they wanted proper transformation programmes in Orbit, but a decision was made. I was recruited back in 2010, so when I joined the organisation at that point, they didn't have a standard approach to managing change. Good stuff was happening. It wasn't all a disaster. But there wasn't a standard approach. So lots of individual things were happening in silos. Some things were quite slow. So they recognised the need to have a programme management office, and that's where I was recruited. So for the first sort of 2 or 3 years, part of my job was to set that up from scratch. There's a team of 8 people now that are project managers, business analysts, and a coordinator that are putting all that together. So we have that standard approach in Orbit, and that's been sort of been embedded and evolving over the last 5 years. But actually doing a group-wide transformation programme was in a whole different league, and a decision was made to do it. But at that time, so you're talking sort of 2011 now, Orbit also started to look forward in the future and say, the world's changing, the sector's changing, the cuts in funding, where we're going to be in 8 to 10 years' time. So they wanted to really take that sort of look forward and understand how the world was changing, what that meant for the sector, then also what that meant for Orbit to be able to make sure whatever transformation we put in place was going to address those needs and make sure that what we did was really going to stick. So I'll come on to a bit more detail about that was why, and you've already touched on the fact of my recent promotion, and that is purely because the executive team at Orbit have recognised that programme approach to managing change is really worthwhile. They can see the benefits of it, and they want more of it, hence my role and that more strategic view. So my role now is looking across the whole business plan. So we have a 2-year transformation programme, which is the crux of today, but now we have an ongoing responsibility to manage change and transformation in the same way, but not overdoing this is a whole big transformation programme. So it's more sort of evolution rather than revolution, which is something we use quite a lot in Orbit. So, in terms of slides, there are 4 key enablers that I want to talk about in the first part of the presentation that I think are the real sort of, we call them game changers, that we look back now, had we not had those in place, we wouldn't be where we are now. We didn't necessarily know it at the time. This wasn't all pre-planned and all beautiful and everything as we expected, but we've learnt these things along the way. And throughout this presentation, I want to share with you some of the sort of highs and lows and the issues that we've had and how we've overcome them, whilst trying to be innovative and sort of do things differently. But obviously, you're getting the nice polished version today, so just bear that in mind. Nothing, not everything is perfect as it may seem as I'm saying it. So the main one is the vision. Now, Sandeep already. Great introduction to that, about the vision, which is important. It's standard programme management, speak and getting a blueprint for where we want to go. That's obviously quite obvious, and me telling you that probably wouldn't be news to you. But for us in Orbit, it was really about the journey, and it's something we use, the terminology, the 2020 journey, because every organisation generally has a history. Businesses don't tend to, sort of pop up from scratch. People decide to do a transformation programme because they're in a state where they feel they need to change or there's a burning platform to change. So actually having that vision is really important, and Sandeep's covered that, but understanding where you've come from and the journey that you've been on is just as important, and understanding where you are now, where you want to go, and having that whole end-to-end journey sort of mapped out and understood is really important. And we do that in Orbit by using some cartoons. So they're on YouTube, you can look at them, which sort of plots the history of Orbit in terms of where we've come from, because generally change and transformation has been happening. It may not be badged as that, it might not be an official programme with official roles and responsibilities, but generally businesses need to change and evolve, and recognising that, especially with your existing staff, to say, look, this isn't all new, you've been doing some of this, but we just need to get a bit more structured and organised about what we're doing and clearer on that. Is really important. So in terms of how we did this at Orbit, back in 2010, we looked forward and said, look, the world's changing, the sector's changing, you know, what are we going to do about it? We decided that for us, 2020 was the sort of end goal, and we really wanted to develop what Orbit needed to look like and what that meant for Orbit by 2020. So we did that by, firstly, starting to look totally externally, so not just within the sector. And we commissioned a whole load of what we called think pieces. So we went out to some of the leading academics in the country. So we went with the London School of Economics, Cambridge University, and on five different, which I'll have to read out. So we did the economy, we did political environment and localism, environmental and energy, social policy, and then around consumers' choice and competition. So we picked 5 key topics. We went out, commissioned the think pieces, and had a report back from each of those. So it was really externally looking, forward thinking, you know, what other factors are going to influence and what does that mean for the housing sector. So looking external, but we also at the same time had a work stream about our staff. I'll come on to that in a future slide, but really important that the staff have a say in this as well. But equally as importantly, our customers. So we did a big piece of work, we called it sort of Big Society, where we went out to our customers, explaining to them this thinking that we're doing. So we're looking ahead, we know we can't stand still, you know, change is going to happen, let's be really on the front foot and, you know, sort of lead the sector in this area. So all those sort of things were happening at the same time, which was really vital to bring together to create the vision, which was, you know, not necessarily happening across the sector. But we also acknowledge that we've gone out and got all this information from staff, customers and some key academics. We needed to bring that back in-house and for Orbit to then digest that and turn it into, well, what does that mean for Orbit as well? So what happened then, each of our exec directors at the time took responsibility for one of those areas and really then shaped that information that were being given from those different sources and made it, you know, in terms of what does that mean for Orbit by 2020. And that really helped shape our vision. Which at that time, you know, wasn't necessarily happening. So that culminated back in 2012. Orbit went to the House of Commons and launched that piece of work, which we called the Housing 2020 work. And that was, you know, sector leading at the time. And what it was designed to do is we weren't keeping this a secret within Orbit and going away and doing our transformation and you know, growing. It was about sharing that in the sector as well, to try and help other organisations sort of, you know, better manage their customers and look forward. So that's something, again, you can look on the internet if you need that. But ultimately, you know, having a vision, understanding where you've come from, acknowledging the journey, that this isn't all new, you know, from scratch, is really important. But the vision as well, it's something that I've seen in other organisations that, you know, they have a vision and that's great, but then it's sort of put on a shelf a little bit and there's lots of work and, you know, a flurry of activity happening around the projects. But it's that constant communication, so it needs to be used to frame the conversations you need to have with your staff and your customers and your key stakeholders about your journey to get into that vision. And that's really important. I'll come on to talk a bit more about that in a future slide. So the second key enabler is around managers. So certainly in Orbit, there's sort of a band of managers that were a bit forgotten. So we spent quite a lot of time with senior management, talking to them, getting engagement and buy-in, and lots of time generally communicating with the general sort of staff. But actually, the really powerful thing can come with engaging with your managers, and especially the sort of first-line managers, so people that may be sort of fairly new into that role or you know, new into that type of management role. Investing time and money, which obviously will cost money, with them in terms of what you're trying to achieve, why you're trying to achieve it, and get them on board can be a massive enabler for change. And I think sometimes that tends to get forgotten in organisations, and certainly in Orbit, we felt that was a gap and we've plugged that gap. It's not perfect. You know, if you spoke to every single person in Orbit, I'm sure they wouldn't all be glowing about everything. But generally, that's something we've tried to address. So that's, you know, another key enabler that I think has helped us. The third one is around the employee voice. So I'm going to come back to the first story about how we created the vision. Staff were imperative in us creating a vision that would be sustainable. It would have been really easy for you know, senior management to go off and create a vision in a dark room and then unveil it to the staff and say, this is what we're doing, and obviously I've seen that happen. Getting their engagement and buy-in throughout that process has been really, really important. Now, there are risks to that. So we went to the sort of staff back in 2010 and said, look, we're starting to think about the future. We don't know what that might look like, but we need to be on the front foot. We want to be prepared, and we want all of you to help us on that journey, which scared some people. You know, generally the feedback was really positive. People liked it. They felt they could have a say. They were yet to sort of see how that would play out, but, you know, really positive. There were some members of staff that found that quite, you know, scary. People feel uncertain that what's it going to mean for my job, and, you know, looking internally. You know, some people might leave as a result, but for me, generally, that, you know, that's a recommended approach I would take, because then they get the opportunity to have their say. They feel like they've got a part of it, they own it. They might not like exactly what the end result is, but it's about, you know, all those voices coming together and actually creating something more powerful than if, you know, senior management involved. It's really important as well, I think, in transformation that everything you bring in as part of your transformation programme isn't new. Because for lots of staff, this will be a whole load of new stuff anyway, and people, you know, tend to find that quite overwhelming, and start to, again, look inwardly rather than what that means for the organisation. So what we tried to do was use existing communication channels we had with staff, and we've got sort of two main ones that were really important for us. One is we have a staff engagement forum called Your Orbit, and every single department in the organisation has somebody, and this is, you know, not a manager, you know, a member of staff that isn't necessarily a manager, that sits and represents their department, and it's a really seen two-way engagement in practice. So what happens with those representatives is that they have the opportunity to get issues from staff from their area of the business, feed those up, and we have really structured feedback and engagement with the executive team on that. The feedback, obviously, what is possible and what isn't, or why things aren't possible, and that helps as well. But also, we use them as a test case as well. So if ever we're introducing new ways of working or new ways of thinking, or, you know, we transformed our pension approach, what we do is with those Your Orbit representatives is we get them involved really early on. And what that does is when we then go out with this change to the business, those people are already up to speed. They understand why we're doing it. They understand, you know, what the implications are going to be, and then staff have got another avenue and another sort of person to go to rather than their manager, which, you know, sometimes is exactly what staff need. So that was really important, and we tried to use them throughout the transformation programme at key points and key junctures, really, to help us get that engagement. We have another process in place around general staff comms. So every month our managers have to brief their staff on a face-to-face basis using a standard newsletter. So centrally we have a comms team that creates a newsletter with all the stuff that's going on around the business for that month, and they have to brief their staff face-to-face, which is a great opportunity to have that on a regular basis. And throughout this transformation programme we used that, so it wasn't something new, it wasn't something different that we were trying to introduce, it was already there in place. And that helped because in that newsletter it's not just about the manager stood in front of somebody and telling them. We have engagement with that, so we frame the newsletter by sort of inform, consult and engage sort of topics. Some stuff, yeah, you're being told this is happening. Other stuff, have a discussion in your team, feedback. We want your opinions, or, you know, just within your team, discuss this thing, what you're going to do about it, how you're going to help, to really get that engagement. So that was really vital in us making sure that staff were engaged. But the things that we introduced as part of the transformation programme, I think Sandy touched on this, was around that you know, senior management visibility. So when we agreed we're going to do this long-term visioning and working out, you know, where we want to be and how we want to grow, our chief exec, Paul Tennant, physically went on a roadshow to every, not every single office, but, you know, we brought people together, but locations around, because we're spread across, you know, the whole of the south and east and the Midlands, in key areas that staff had the opportunity to see him face to face, and he explained why we needed to do this. It's not a secret. You know, the world's changing, all that I've been through, and really get their understanding of why we're doing something. But then also saying, in 6 months' time, you're going to get the opportunity to feed into this. So that got staff sort of thinking that, okay, right, I've got an opportunity now. So then in 6 months' time, we arranged a whole load of what we called World Cafes. Now, some people may have heard of those, some haven't. So, again, every single member of staff, regardless of their role and seniority, the opportunity to come together in groups. And World Cafes are basically, you set the area up like a cafe, so there's sort of tablecloths and there's cake and things like that. People quite like that. But basically, you're writing on the table. So you'll give each table a topic to discuss around what the vision's going to be and where we're going and what we're doing. And they write their ideas or their questions or their suggestions on the tables. And then after, say, 15 minutes, everyone gets up and moves to the next table so that the next people coming can see what's been written, they can add to it, they can question it. And that was an engagement method we used at the time, which staff really liked. So it wasn't just send us your ideas into an email address or whatever, it was trying to be a bit more innovative and a bit different. And then we've sort of followed that up. So the Poor Tenant Roadshow is now an annual thing that we do, which is great when you're doing transformation programmes, because again, it's about that messaging, where we come from, where we're going, and just being really clear. And seeing it from the very top in Orbit goes down really well. I don't know whether that will necessarily work in every organisation, but people like to see him talk. He's quite inspirational. So that's something that we had great feedback on, and we've sort of embedded now. So yeah, just really important to use your staff, but be really, I suppose, cautious about overusing them. So one of the things in Orbit we have got a lot better at is, rather than just going out to staff on a regular basis to say, give us your ideas, give us your opinions, is being really selective when we do that, to be really really careful that when you ask for it, that you're going to do something with it. Because we've found in the past that we've been so caught up in getting the engagement and asking for opinions that we've then sort of lacked to make sure that we close the loop and go back and be really good. So we're a lot better at that now, so that's something that we've definitely learned from. And then the last sort of key enabler is around organisation integrity. So in Orbit, we have 5 values that are, I won't read from here. Honesty, excellence, respect, partnership and innovation. Now, it's one of the things that when I joined Orbit 5 years ago really struck me, it's really powerful. So I'd worked for big global organisations in the past in the financial services sector, and they all had values. They were up on the wall, they were on the internet, they were wherever you could see them, but they didn't live them. It was just a tick in the box to say we have values. When I joined Orbit, I saw people living and breathing those values. I'm not saying it's perfect in every area, but they are embedded and threaded through everything that we do. So our appraisal process, they're part of the topics that we discuss. We have competency frameworks. All of our job descriptions have those values in, the things that are needed against them. We have all our one-to-ones, the templates have those in. Everything that we do is aligned to those. So when you're trying to bring a transformation programme in, there are still some stable, consistent things that staff understand and get. And it's about using those things to sort of say, look, yes, we're changing and transforming, but ultimately this is still us, this is still what we're about. And that was really powerful as well, that staff didn't feel like everything was changing, because that in itself could be quite destructive. So they're the 4 key enablers, but I do want to sort of go through some of the things in a bit more detail, some things that I personally feel, and we've had feedback and when we've done reviews, that have been instrumental in making this transformation programme successful. So the first one is alignment to business plan, and you did mention that, Sandeep. This isn't a diagram for me to go through, this is just an example of something that we used. But it sounds really simple. If you're about to embark on a transformation programme, it's important that you look at how your business planning works and the cycles in it, because if you're out of sync with those, that in itself can be difficult, because as you're developing business plans, you should be making sure that you are getting the change and transformation that you need. And that would feed into creating a transformation programme. Having it the other way round, saying, part way through a new business plan comes out, that could totally, go against what you're trying to do in your programme. So really upfront trying to agree with senior management about aligning these transformation programmes to your business plans, I would say is vital. And in Orbit, what we decided to do, we were looking towards 2020, and at that time, we were in a business plan that took us to 2013, sort of March 2013. So we decided to have sort of 3 chunks of transformation. One was from 13 to 15, which is what I'm sort of talking about today, and the lessons learnt from that, which finished in March. We've embarked on a new one from April, which will take us to 17, and then we'll have a final push from 17 to 20. So that was agreed as part of the business planning process, but we also agreed it as part of transformation. But what we're not doing is sort of bringing fatigue into the organisation to say, we haven't communicated to the business that, this is going to be happening forever and a day. We've had a really focused and concentrated transformation programme from 13 to 15, and we now don't use that language with our staff. This is, people are used to it, they understand it's going to happen, it will continue to happen. So we're more relaxed about it. The communications that we're saying is a bit more relaxed, but we are still behind the scenes managing a transformation programme, and that seems to work as well. Staff feel like, yes, we're getting to where we need to be, and we're sort of continuing the momentum of that. But actually, let's not overdo it with the transformation programmes. And I think that's been a real sort of key thing for Orbit to make sure that staff don't feel like that. even with that said, when we were planning the first transformation programme, even that, for some people, and in some senior people as well, you assume that senior people in organisations are going to get all this and they're going to know exactly what you mean and understand what you're trying to do. That's not my experience. So even though we'd said we're going to chunk these transformation programmes down, the first one's for 2 years, we struggled with actually people understanding, well, we know we want to get in 2020, we know where we are now and where we've come from. But actually 2 years is a long way away, and how is what you're suggesting here going to help us, and where does that get us to? So we chunked that down. So our first transformation programme, which hopefully will be the most painful because we've learned from that, we split that into 2. So we had, what is this year about, which really helped focus people to say, yes, we've got all that long-term stuff going on, great, but what are we doing this year? What does that mean for our customers and staff and suppliers, and really focus them down. So we created things like this diagram that we used to engage. This didn't go out, sent out to every single member of staff, but use it as an engagement tool with senior members of staff in certain forums and meetings as well for people to understand, and it works really well. So I would say try and chunk things down as much as possible, but really clear what you're trying to achieve and align it to your business plan. Again, just an example of what we use. I'm not going to go through that. But having a clear structure, and Sandeep did mention this as well, is really important. And this is one of the major questions that Orbit senior management were raising when we were sort of planning, do we have a transformation programme or not? Because to them, is it going to be over bureaucratic? Is it going to introduce a whole load of extra work and complexity? What benefit will that bring? But without these clear roles and responsibilities and clear structure, we would not have got to where we have now. And that's is really recognised in Orbit, and partly sort of the reason that my role has been created. So having a programme manager, having somebody with that oversight, and I'll come on to that in a future slide, but how the transformation programme will be structured. So for us, I'll just flick to this slide. For us, we wanted to be really clear what our priorities were. So for us, it's about understanding our customers and communities and what we're doing around those. So are our products right? Are they not? Are we tailoring services in the right way? And all those types of things was a priority. And also growth. What does growth mean for Orbit? Is that just managing more houses, or is it a growth in other areas? We have an Orbit Homes division that builds homes, sells them at market sale. What does that mean for Orbit? So we had quite a bit of focus work around that, and the resources, so how are we going to fund these things that we want to do? But underpinning that are all these things. So, what does that mean for our people and our culture and structures? We did a big structural change across the organisation during this transformation programme to make sure the people were in the right place. And some of that is still bedding in. It was quite a big restructure. Are our systems and processes right? Making sure that we are supporting people in what they're working. And this had a massive impact in terms of engagement as well. So we decided to have a lean approach to our process reviews. So we got employed a couple of experts, permanent members of staff in Orbit, to look at that but get staff involved. We're saying to staff, these are your processes. What do you want to do with them? What do you think are the best things? And really, yes, make them lean, yes, make them more efficient, but it was more about getting engagement and talking to the people that are the experts and not, getting external people in to sort of totally transform your processes. And then what's the technology and the innovation that we need? Technology has become more and more vital in our frontline services. Certainly since I've been at Orbit in 5 years, that's totally transformed. We have a lot more services online now. All of our frontline staff have iPads. We're trying to get our people that should be working with our customers out there in the field and not sat in an office or coming back to look at documentation or fill a system out. So we saw these as sort of enabling change streams, but really important that dynamic was created because, again, when we're articulating and talking about it, people can understand what the priorities are and this made sense to them, but also supported by these. The other key thing, going back to the structure, in terms of who was leading on these change streams, these were existing leadership team members in Orbit. We didn't bring external people in to do this. It was all done in-house. And there was some backfilling that happened to enable these people to do it. Perhaps not enough if you spoke to them. But it was really important that we, as part of the engagement and making sure that this stuck, that we don't, we're not sat here in 2 years' time saying, we need another transformation programme and go over old ground again. we needed to get the buy-in from existing senior management, and that worked really, really well. That combination of having the structure, having existing staff in place that knew the business, knew the sector, really made a difference and enabled us to sort of get things done perhaps quicker than we would have done, you know, rather than spending time trying to get these people on board. So really important. I'm going to talk about benefit maps now, not in detail. And it's a standard programme management approach, but one of the things that was a tipping point, I think, for the programme. So we started the programme, we decided we were doing it, we did all the planning, we got all these people in place, all the structure, all beautiful. We started to have, you know, regular meetings and sort of, you know, flesh out exactly what was going to be delivered and all the, you know, the PIDs and things like that. After about month 3 or 4, I think sort of, you know, people then start to question, think, well, what am I doing? What is all this about? And I could start to see that sort of questioning and those thought processes creeping back into people's language that we had probably, you know, 6, 12 months prior. Which was really concerning, because I'm thinking, well, we've just set this programme off, you know, there's a lot of expectation around it, I want to make it successful, you know, what are we going to do? So benefit maps are something that I discussed about having initially, but we decided, I won't go into all the detail, that we weren't going to do it. So when all these discussions are sort of, you know, doubts, I suppose, creeping in people's minds, this was one of the tools that I sort of pulled out the bag and said, look, you know, do you remember this thing, benefit maps? And basically what it allows you to do is map what your long-term strategic aims and objectives are. So for us, it was the 2020 vision, right back to what you're doing, what the project outputs are on individual projects. And by having that map, so you map what the project outputs are, what outcome they're going to bring, what the benefits are, and then therefore how that links to our long-term vision. Having those mapped out helped. It wasn't overnight, but in a very, very short amount of time, especially the leads of those change streams got it again. They understood that, yes, this thing I'm working, you know, this project that's happening here, I understand now how that links to our long-term vision. So yes, everything we're doing is the right thing. We could see gaps, so we could see perhaps where areas were a little bit weak. We needed to, you know, flesh them up a little bit or introduce a new project. We could see where there were bottlenecks of projects. So really, really powerful. We didn't sort of go overkill with benefit maps. You can end up with, you know, hundreds and hundreds of pages of lots of complex things. We were quite pragmatic about it. But if you talk to those change stream leads today, they would say this is one of the things that really helped them to get it, and therefore their engagement with other staff helped as well, and things rolled on from there. So a real, for me, at a point when the programme could have actually gone quite wrong, and it didn't. So I'd recommend doing those. And also I'll come on to it, is a communication tool. So we were reporting to our programme board at the time, which was our exec team, on a quarterly basis around this. And the sort of first couple of reports to them, you know, were fine, they were okay with them. But once we introduced benefit maps, we could quite easily show them where we perhaps had issues and things were not going as well. So all we'd do was highlight the box in amber or red, whichever was applicable at the time, do exception reporting, so they would get quite clear and concise. This project output or this outcome or this benefit is going a bit wrong, and why. But they could also see the linkages, and it was really, really powerful. So for the individual sort of change stream leads and the exec team really, really liked this. And this is something we're continuing in the future programmes that we've started already. So this is a slide you would expect me to say. Everyone needs a programme manager. But having that role, and this has been recognised in the reviews that we've done about the programme, having that person there as the helicopter view, as they like to call it, across all of the change streams, understanding the linkages, identifying gaps and issues, although, you know, everybody's got a responsibility to do that, was really, really powerful. And again, one of the reasons why my role's been created as Director of Programmes. It's also kept people on track. So as I said about the benefit maps, having that programme manager role responsible for everything, I could see where people were struggling or where we were potentially going to get issues, and I could, you know, come up with a solution and try and help them work through it. Without that role, expecting that group of people to work together and come with, you know, with their own conclusions would not have been as effective and maybe not have resulted in a successful programme. Making sure that people stick to the agreed, so you've got a structure and roles and responsibilities and they've all been signed off, keeping people to that, making sure the meetings happen. Because some people say, oh, do we need a meeting, is it really? Well, if there are things to discuss, then yes, we do. And there were times when those discussions were held, and, you know, we make them as short as possible, as concise as possible, but keeping that governance structure going and in place was vital as well to make sure we kept on track. Because with these programmes and they're 2 years ahead, it's really easy to think, oh, I've got loads of time, we'll be fine, it won't matter if we miss a meeting. But having that real rigour in place was instrumental really in making this successful. I've already talked about communication engagement, but in terms of obvious, you need to engage with your people that are affected by the change or people that can influence the change. That's expected. But for me, what I want to talk about here is messaging. So when we decided we're having the programme and we went out to the business and said, we're doing this shiny transformation programme, isn't it great? We started to communicate what we were doing, what the plans were. People were switched off. The feedback was, why are you telling me all this? It's jargon. What does it mean for me? What should I take from this? And we thought, people want to be communicated to. People want to know what we're doing. That this isn't a behind-the-scenes thing. You've all helped us create the vision. It's really exciting. Come on, now we've got the programme up and running. Well, to most people, that was just boring. That was just not important to them whatsoever. So again, around the sort of 3-4 months into the programme, all these things were happening at the same time, which was, I didn't have many, I had lots of sleepless nights. Was we totally transformed our communication strategy around this. We thought we had a great one, it was all going swimmingly, but no, it wasn't. So, using the existing channels, that didn't change, but the messaging changed, and we spent quite a lot of time being really clear on the language that was being used. So we purposely didn't use any project management jargon, programmes, benefit maps, strategies, blah, blah, blah. It was all about getting it right for staff and customers. The whole reason we're transforming, coming back to the change streams, is for our customers, to make sure that we are delivering a great service, that they understand what that means, that we are developing, we're tailoring services, we're making sure that we're in a great position in terms of our growth and having the right funding in place to deliver those things. They're the things that are important to staff, and that's how we should communicate to them. So we agreed certain terms, so any internal comms that happened, at team briefings, the roadshows, the consistent language is used throughout. And we refer to this whole thing called our 2020 journey. So we don't talk to them about the chunking in the business plans and everything else that's done behind the scenes. We talk to them about the 2020 journey, which, again, conjures up the fact we've come a long way, we are where we are, but we've got a long way to go. And that's what this means. And we communicate on things that matter to people, that affect them, that they can influence. I mentioned that you sort of kind of overkill with getting staff engaged, and we did it with the vision, and we were in danger at some points of perhaps over consulting with staff and asking for too many ideas and too much thought. And I would say just be really cautious about when you're doing that, because you need to make sure that you're following those up and you're doing something with it. That's certainly something we've changed and is working a lot better now. So yeah, more around the sort of comms and the messaging. The last thing I've got is review and transition into business as usual. So review, again, standard project management. Once you've delivered something, review, lessons learned, making sure you build those into future programmes and projects. But in a long transformation programme, waiting until the end to sort of work out what went well and what didn't, is not going to work. So we had regular intervals throughout the programme to reflect key lessons learned. Not necessarily a formal big shiny document, that came at the end, but to make sure throughout that you're logging those things, feeding them in and tweaking and changing. So all the stuff I've talked about, how we engage with staff, how we engage with our customers, all the things that we were learning throughout the programme were being documented and acted upon, and that really helped us be a lot more agile and a lot more sort of reactive to what was going wrong. And then transitioning to business as usual, it's really easy to introduce these new things as part of your transformation programme, but when that comes to an end, what's going to happen to those things sounds really obvious, but there's a few examples in orbit. One is the sort of the poor tenant roadshows. That's something that's stuck and that's now into business as usual. Our comms team manage that. That's not part of the transformation programme. We also have we had lots of noise during the programme from staff about, oh, we feel overloaded, we've got all this new stuff coming in and we're so busy, we've got busy day jobs, and we feel confused about what the priorities are. Is it change? Is it our day job? And all those sort of questions. So we introduced a group now that sits on a monthly basis and looks at all the change across the organisation and prioritises those things, and then we go out to staff to tell them these are the priorities in the business, and that now has been embedded in business as usual, and that's starting to help shape the resourcing that we have on change. So, you might have your PMO resources, say I'm responsible for, to actually implement the change, but the resources in the business can sometimes be overlooked. And that group of people now are looking at that and making sure that we have change sort of happening in an order that's not going to disrupt the business as well. So just really important that those things aren't forgotten. That's it. Any questions?
It sounds like your overall programme's for 7 years, is that right? 2013 to 2020?
The transformation journey,
yeah. The journey.
Yeah.
How sort of set has that been from the beginning? I mean, have you sort of got it all mapped out and you're following it all the way through?
Not
or is it changing?
Not what's involved in those, but the chunking of the business plan. So that's the business plan cycle, and we've agreed to align the transformation against that. So we don't know all the detail of what's going to be included, because as we evolve, things will change priorities. So have you
got an idea of what you'll be doing in 2018 on the transformation journey?
Yeah, so we've, at a very high level, certainly around some of the areas that you saw, the customers and communities, we have an idea about those different areas. And having the vision is really important. So our vision is quite simple and easy to understand, so that any member of staff can pick it up and understand what it means. But obviously there's a lot of work goes behind that to sort of make sure that we understand what that means from a business point of view, but not in detail.
So you don't have like projects with definitions of what it is you'll be doing there too? It's just a very sort of high level.
Yeah, so the transformation programmes start to be planned 6 months before. So the last 6 months for that one starts to plan for the next one in terms of what that would mean, and then this one sort of kicked off in April, although it's a business, not as a transformation programme. But we are monitoring projects within it and understand what it is, but we won't plan the next one until 6 months before.
Okay.
I think it's quite impossible to sort of do that in detail.
Well, I would be surprised if you'd said that you did have that.
But having the vision, obviously we have a rough idea of what we want to do, but things can change, all sorts of things could happen between now and then, so we don't spend a lot of time doing that.
What would you say has been the biggest challenge today?
Just one. I think it's the engagement side of it, and that's quite, I suppose, a broad answer. But what I found is that with in senior management, you agree. I think Fanny mentioned as well. You agree what you're going to do and where you're going, and then somebody will just have a blip for a few days or whatever, and start to try and rework it all. And I think that's really, when it comes down to the strong programme management and approach, to say this is what we agreed, we've communicated to staff, and we're not going to do a total U-turn just because you decided. But that does take, that's probably not necessarily achievable in every organisation, but that engagement of people, forgetting what you said to me. I think I've mentioned this to somebody earlier. To me, once I've been convinced or I agree with something, then that's it. That's what I carry on with, and I can go with that forever and a day. Some people agree to things, and then maybe a week or a month or a year later, all of a sudden they forgot. The memory's gone, and it's, they're in a room, and you've got a room full of people, and you all think you're going in the right direction. And somebody goes, "Well, why would it? What is that for?" And you just cry because you think, "Well, we've been through all of this." And then all the other people in the room sort of go, "Yeah, why are we doing this?" And you just think, "Oh." So that to me is just that constant, and having the diagrams and things like that, and constantly bringing them out and doing engagement has been the hardest, but one of the reasons why it's successful.
I noticed that you've got programme director. Are they actually on your exec, the programme director? I can't remember what his name was.
Oh, sorry, the
person you original.
Yeah, he was.
Is that you now? Is that?
I'm not on the exec,
so
I'm on the leadership team.
Because I would imagine that makes a difference having somebody from programmes on.
Well, basically, Tony Williams, who's, if you may have heard of him, fantastic. Really experienced in change and transformation. He was one of the advocates of doing it in a programme approach. And one of the reasons why the exec agreed to it back in the day. It wouldn't have happened without him. He was one of the sort of key advocates for it. And some of the other execs needed convincing, but they agreed to it, and I would be in the role I'm in now if they didn't think it was successful. But yeah, he was really. He has semi-retired from the 1st of April. Nothing to do with me. He is working with us sort of 1 to 2 days a week doing consultancy, just to sort of hand over. So we have Boris Worrell, who's our executive director of Futures, who I report to now, who has sort of taken over that organisational development responsibility. So he was one of the ones that needed convincing, if I'm honest, before, but he now is, fully gets it, understands it, and obviously supports me fully in continuing this in the next few years.
One of the challenges I'd imagine is because you had your benefit profile, benefit strategy map, and with a programme running that period of time, I'd imagine that you've gathered some benefits, but then actually try and lock them down so you can realise them over a longer period of time. I'm just thinking about, say, customer satisfaction or efficiency savings or whatever it is that's in that benefit plan. Are there any sort of lessons you've learned from making sure that what the transformation programme has delivered in terms of benefits actually are sustainable in the longer term?
Yeah, and we're still waiting for some of those benefits to, you know, the programme only finished in March, so we're still waiting for some of those to be realised. But that in itself was a massive challenge to get the business to understand that, you know, we need business cases for things, and, you know, we will check up on benefits, and people, you know, in the business responsible for those benefits. It's not me, it's not a project manager that might come from the PMO. You are responsible, and I've done so much work over this the last 5 years, and the pennies finally dropping. We have really integrated processes with our finance teams on this to follow it up in terms of budgets. So if people are identifying cashable savings in their benefit in their business cases, that we hold them to account. Now they might not all come about, there might be other factors influencing that, but we are holding people to account. And although that was quite painful to start with, you know, it is getting better and happening. So yeah, we've realised some benefits. I mean, just very recently, we have a star survey that goes out to our customers every year, and one of the key drivers for this whole programme was customer satisfaction, and it was on the decline. We've now got the figures back, and it's gone up quite a few percent. They're still looking at all the data, and it's not been sort of published yet. But so to me, that's a massive. I'm not, you know, we need to sort of look at it in more detail, but I think that's a result of this programme, in that, you know, we've done lots of work around our processes and making sure systems are in place, the restructure, getting people bedded into the, you know, to the right teams, is all part of it as well. So yeah, does that answer your question?
No, that was really good.
Yeah.
Just a continuation of Steve's question, actually. How are you measuring it? Because obviously it's a 7 or 8 years journey you have. So how are you measuring that your vision is, for example, customer satisfaction to be 98%? So how are you measuring it over a period of time?
When we set our targets, so in our vision we have 9 targets that, you know, we want to get to by 2020.
Sure.
And then what we've done is, because we've agreed the business plan cycle, we've then got what we're calling milestones every year from now until then. So although we don't know exactly the detail of what the transformation programmes may contain, we know at what level we need around these 9 targets, and you know, one of the biggest one is around satisfaction, to get that to 90% by 2020. You know, we may not achieve that, you know, it's hard to say at this point, but certainly the recent figures about current satisfaction, it is really going in the right direction. Now we need to understand what factors, or other factors might influence that. But yeah, so we've already set those milestones. They get reviewed obviously year on year to make sure that they're, you know, achievable and stretching, because some of them we're actually starting to exceed, so we need to increase them even more. You know, some we're a bit concerned about, and we'll do more work on those. So we've set that, but also acknowledging that that won't be set in stone. It will evolve and change every year as we go through.
I've got one for you. I was intrigued by your group that when staff are feeling stressed can prioritise. I mean, we tried this even within the housing team. The housing director says, well, he doesn't understand enough of the detail to, you know, he needs to get his team in, and we've got a real tension between a strategic view across a pretty siloed business where, frankly, the people doing the commercial rent don't care about welfare reform and vice versa. And I'm head of IT, and frankly, I'm the only one that does a programme plan, and I have to surface priority clashes, particularly in those back-end support teams like IT and HR. There are tensions where we can't support everybody simultaneously. How on earth do you get a group that prioritises across a huge range?
It started in IT. So when I joined the organisation, I reported to the IT director, and you know, brought the standards in for the whole group about managing change. One of the first things I raised was, how do we know what we're working on? There was no central collation even of what stuff was happening, never mind a, you know, portfolio approach and doing things properly. And I, you know, straight away was like, we need to get this group together that prioritises across everything, and straight away, or very quickly, that would not have worked had we done it as I wanted back at that time. We need to go through a lot of this stuff to get it. So the CAP, as we've called it, which is our change, approval and prioritisation group, snappily title, is a recent sort of been embedded. So it started last year, but it's only really been properly embedded since January this year. So we're on our sort of we're on 6 meetings so far. Anyway, it's still work in progress, but it was that acknowledgement that if we don't do it, we're going to get resistance, we're going to get clashes. We've got this whole thing about staff feeling overwhelmed and overworked. You know, it's not me saying that, it's people in their businesses are telling them that, and they want a solution to it. So I think it's a case of them really understanding that they've got a problem, and there's something out there that could fix it or at least help it. And it was for them to get to that realisation before we could really get it embedded. So some of it was organic, some of it was, you know, me sort of picking up when people were mentioning things like that, saying, well, if we had this type of group in place, that could certainly alleviate some of those issues. There's still some sceptics around it, but just as recently as this month, we do very high-level resource planning, not scientific, you know, hour by hour, but all the change that's coming through, which all comes through my team and through this group. We map out rough estimates of resourcing, and then we overlay that with all the teams in the organisation and put some sort of calculations to say this turns amber if it's got, you know, a large, a small, and you know, a medium project. This goes red if it's got more than that. And what that allows us to do is not scientifically say, well, we need to move things around, but have a conversation then with that area of the business and say, you know, we've got an issue in September with the housing team because all these projects are laying on top. Is it an issue? Because it might not be the same people working on it. We don't do it, you know, at an individual level. And that has only been biting really this month. So we've got this flag to say in September we've got an issue. We're talking to that area of the business. They're able to then feed in. And if they come back and say, look, yeah, we've got the same group of people working on these projects, we will reschedule those projects to make sure that that happens smoothly. That would never have happened before this group. And the people on the group, and we have representatives from all different parts of the business on it, you know, again, they're starting to see it in action. So they've agreed to doing it, but they're just, and that's a fairly recent thing, but really powerful. So it's quite a simple approach. It's not resource intensive really, but it's having an impact. And in my view, is if I can get them convinced on that and seeing the benefit, then we can perhaps get a bit more detailed, a bit more scientific, and you know, more towards a proper resource planning. But yeah, some of it is organic, and I would say in all but the last 5 years, that's been a theme that is about evolution, not revolution. And that's what's worked in Orbit, and I've seen that for myself. I didn't necessarily believe that at the beginning, but I can see now. You know, we wouldn't be where we are now if we tried to go in and sort of rip everything out.
You mentioned before that initially you set up a PMO from scratch when you got there. There's kind of two questions around that. First one, it would be how much of the PMO, or what part of the PMO is involved in the transformation roadmap you've got for 2020? Is it all of it because you set it up, or are you just utilising part of it?
It's a mix. So a lot of the PMO at the moment are very technical, very IT based, just because of the nature of where it came from. And in Orbit, because 5 years ago we had a long way to go around technology, that was the types of resources we needed. But as I've evolved the group and got different people in, different skill sets, we have been leaning more towards people that are able to manage larger programmes of change. So the majority was me, so I was the programme manager for this programme, and involved some of the PMO people, but it was a mix really. We've probably got half of them working on the transformation work and half on normal business as usual stuff.
I guess the second question is that I look after the programme project management for Gravitas in NHS, and I've had a big divide between people saying a PMO is a necessity within programme management to effectively run programmes across organisations, and some says we have project managers in each department, we don't need a PMO.
Yeah.
How
Well,
necessary
in Orbit we've got a bit of a hybrid, so the PMO of 8 people doesn't manage every single bit of change across the organisation, and I don't think that would necessarily work, certainly in Orbit anyway. But we had that central best practice and the standards that we set. We set what the templates are, people need to follow that. We do all the training, do some quite innovative simulation training with staff on it. It's not just boring me with their lecturing and like after you kind of show. So we're responsible for all of that centrally, and we have experts managing the key important stuff. And that's partly our role. When change comes in as a great idea, as we call it, we then evaluate what the size it might be, who might need to be involved. The bigger, more corporate stuff is managed from the PMO, because that's where the biggest risk is. If it's a local change, a small change, it gets logged with our team, but they just get on with it and do it, and just take the sort of best practice and support from us as they need it. And this sort of hybrid as well, there's certain people in the organisation that have managed slightly bigger projects for their area, and that's part of their development. You know, they look to our team to help develop and coach people as well. So in Orbit it's a real blend, but I think that works well. So the business don't feel as if, oh God, we can't touch change, it's all about the PMO. But also for me, they feel responsible for it as well. It's not just about chucking it over the fence to us and we chuck it back, which wouldn't work. You know, the business like to feel as if they've got some control over change, but they're following the standards. So that's how it works.
Any more questions? I'm just conscious of time.
I've got training at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you very much, Tara.